I can see you now.
Okay.
So I've already started the session, so I'll just start. Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Myself, Pooja from Singapore Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, welcome you all to another interesting session on India Union Budget 2022. The India Budget 2022 was recently announced on 1st of February 2022. With India moving up strongly and steadily in the ease of doing business, it gets an edge to attract private and foreign investors. Investor confidence is strong in infrastructure sectors, supported by favorable long-term financing conditions, recovery stimulus packages, and overseas investment programs. The proposed policy initiatives by the FM, coupled with factors like attractive Indian markets, presence of skilled force, stable political environment, will surely be viewed positively by the investors, thereby making India as a favorable destination for investment. To decode what India Budget had in store for Singapore companies looking for investment in India and vice versa, we have organized this session today in association with HSBC and KNAV India. Without further ado, let me invite Mr. Kishore Daryanani to share his views from the Singapore SME perspective. Mr. Kishore is a Vice Chairman of Singapore Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the Managing Director of Ganga Jamuna Electronics Private Limited, and an Honorary Consul of the Democratic Republic of Congo. He founded his business in 1986 with a paid-up capital of $2.4 million, Ganga Jamuna Electronics, which is one of the leading import and export business for branded consumer products. Within a span of 22 years and under the leadership of Mr. Kishore, the company has secured a strong foothold in the new and emerging market and CIS countries. Born in a family of businessmen, Mr. Kishore has an eye for entrepreneurship and decades of hands-on experience. He has held key appointments in several companies, which tells of his vast experience. Mr. Kishore, please.
Thank you so much, Pooja. A warm welcome to fellow panelists, Mrs. Pranul Bandari, Chief Economist, HSBC, Mr. Uday Ved, Partner, KNAV, Mr. Amitabh Khemka, Partner, KNAV, and participants who have joined us online for this webinar. I'm happy to welcome all of you for this session on analysis of the Indian Budget 2022 and the road ahead for growth. The Singapore Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry has organized this virtual webinar in association with KNAV and HSBC to understand the implications of the Union Budget 2022 to 2023 and the growth trajectory it sets for the Indian economy. The Indian budget is not just important for those living in India. It's also just as important for those residing out of India. For us in the Indian business community, and with links and business dealings with different states in India, we will look out for two things. Nationally, what is being given out? And secondly, what each state in India is allocated for its infrastructural development. Secondly, if there are any developments in the FDI sector. In this context, India's post-pandemic budget 2022 is definitely ranked positive, ringtones for private and foreign investor participation. As mentioned by the PM of India, Mr. Narendra Modi, in his virtual address to the World Economic Forum, this is the time to invest in India. With India moving up strongly and steadily in the ease of doing business, it gets an edge to attract private and foreign investors. Investor confidence is strong in infrastructure sectors, supported by favorable and long-term financing conditions, recovery stimulus packages, and overseas investment programs. India has attracted highest ever total FDI of US 81.72 billion during the financial year 2020 to 2021 in terms of top investor countries. Singapore is at the apex with 29% for the year 2020 to 2021. Deep reforms like PM Gati Shakti, a national master plan for multimodal connectivity, essentially a digital platform to bring 16 ministries, including railways and roadways together for integrated planning and coordinated implementation of infrastructure connectivity projects will surely attract foreign visitors. Economic zones like textile clusters, pharmaceutical clusters, defense corridors, electronic parks, industrial corridors, fishing clusters, agri-zones will be covered to improve connectivity and make Indian businesses more competitive. In a bid to boost the data centers and energy storage systems, including dense charging infrastructure and grid-scale battery systems in the country, the government has granted it infrastructure status. Grant of status is a positive move by the government and is an acknowledgement of the growing dependency of the success of technology-enabled sectors on data centers. This would help build world-class data center ecosystem by attracting investments from domestic and global players and would nurture a localization of data center industry. Data center companies would henceforth be able to access funds at a cheaper rate and consequently benefit the economy in the long run. The FM, in a speech, indicated a view to promote exports. It is proposed to replace the Special Economic Zones Act with a new legislation that will enable the states to become partners in development of enterprise and service hubs. This will cover all large existing and new industrial enclaves to optimally utilize available infrastructure and enhance competitiveness of exports. This positive move recognized that SEZ exports increased from US $3 billion in 2005 to 2006 to US $102 billion in the year 2020 to 2021. Investment in the SEZs increased from 0.54 billion in years 2005 to 2006 to yes 83 billion by the years 2020 to 2021. And importantly has provided jobs to overall 2,358,136 persons till 2020 to 2021. With nearly 40% of the approved SEZs yet to become operational. This will surely become a booster dose for the stakeholders to invest, export, and generate employment. The proposed policy initiatives by the FM, coupled with factors like attractive Indian markets, presence of skilled workforce, stable political environment, will surely be reviewed positively by the investors, thereby making India a favorable destination for investment. In this session, our experts shall analyze the Indian Union budget for your advantage and understanding. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kishore. We have an exciting panel today to decode and analyze the Indian Union budget. We have with us Ms. Pranjal Bhandari, Chief India Economist, HSBC. Ms. Pranjal Bhandari is the Chief India Economist at HSBC Securities and Capital Markets India Private Limited. She is responsible for developing the firm's position on macroeconomics and public policy in India, leading the firm's economics research franchisee from Mumbai. Prior to joining HSBC, Pranjal completed a resident fellowship at the IMF in Washington, D.C. after graduating as a Mason Fellow from the Harvard Kennedy School. Previously, she worked at India's Ministry of Finance with the Chief Economic Advisor and at the Planning Commission with the Deputy Chairman. She has held roles as an economist covering Asian markets at Goldman Sachs and at UK's Department for International Development. Pranjal also holds a Master's in Economics from University of Cambridge and a BA in Economics from St. Stephen's College, New Delhi. Today, she will be sharing her reviews on economic perspective of the Indian budget 2022. Ms. Pranjal, please.
Great. Thank you, everybody, and thanks for joining in. Thanks, Pooja, for introducing me, and thank you, Mr. Deranani, for the lovely comments. They were very comprehensive. So, let me try to look at the budget from the sort of entire macro backdrop. Where does this budget fit? Where was India? What change will this budget make to the trajectory of the country? Now, I'll start with some of the smaller details. The big number that everybody looks forward to in the budget, at least in the budget math, is the fiscal deficit. How much more is the government spending vis-a-vis what it's earning? And the fiscal deficit has turned out to be slightly more than markets had expected going into the budget, which means that the government is planning to spend more, to sort of support growth more than markets had expected. But if you look at the numbers generally, the numbers look credible. In the past, a lot of people have questioned the budget math, saying that maybe it was too optimistic on, revenue assumptions, maybe very high growth. But, I can say with a lot of certainty this time that the math of the budget looks extremely credible. In fact, so much so that my sense is that tax revenues will turn out to be even better than what the budget has actually forecasted. So in that sense, at least in terms of the math, the budget may over-deliver and surprise positively than what it has promised to do at the start of the year. Now, what was the real focus and the real thrust of the budget? And it's very clear. It was CapEx. It was capital expenditure. The capital expenditure outlays in the budget are expected to grow 35% year on year in the next 12 months compared to the previous 12 months. That's a very large number for 1 year, 35% year-on-year increase. That amounts to a 0.4% of GDP higher CapEx spending done by the government. Now, as soon as you hear such a big number in India, your first question is it realistic? Will the government be able to do so much of CapEx? Because we know that a lot of times there are implementation issues on the ground. The central government generally drives large capex projects, like large building of large ports or national highways. Many of them get stuck because of things like environment clearances, right of way. Will the government be able to do this big capex push? And this time my answer is yes, it probably will. And the reason is that its strategy this time seems to be a bit different. Now, in the past, a lot of the government capex has been done by the central government alone. But this time around, they are sharing the implementation burden with the states. When I say a 35% increase in the central government capex outlay, it's not only what the central government will spend, it also includes a 1 trillion rupee interest-free loan that the central government will give to the state governments and make them a partner of implementing this capex push. And from that perspective, the implementation pressure will be split and shared between both the agencies, the center and the states. And my sense is that is what makes the number realistic. That is what makes me believe that, yes, this is actually an honest push to CapEx. Now, where in CapEx is this sort of focused on? The central government is focusing a lot on telecom. It's focusing a lot on railways and on roadways. The state governments can focus on anything. Generally speaking, state governments run many micro projects, from small roads, by-lanes, to water plants, to small power, infrastructure improvements. So that can, be across the board. This push to CapEx, I think, does have implication for at least the India-Singapore corridor, in the sense that whenever India does big CapEx, it actually imports a lot of project goods, capital goods, materials. So I think this will have implication for foreign trade as well. The one grouse I may have with the budget is that, while they gave a big capex push, the social welfare spending was actually cut. And later, in subsequent interviews, the finance minister and the finance secretary clarified that there has been a change in strategy. This time, they feel that if you give somebody a social welfare benefit, the benefit will only last for 24 hours. But if you do it via a capex push, that can lead to a permanent job, and that can be a permanent social welfare benefit. In that sense, the government has really tried to move from revenue expenditure towards capital expenditure. That has been their strategy in this budget. I'll move on to some of the sectors, from the, there's an overall strategy, but then how does it percolate down to sectors? I'll move down to sectors. The one sector, that sort of shines through is manufacturing. There have been some steps, announced for the small businesses. One is the capex itself. Whenever you do good capex on infrastructure, it makes life easier for small businesses. Also, while the capex is underway, while the infrastructure is getting built, small businesses can really participate by providing a lot of raw materials and specialized inputs into the build out of the infrastructure. So one is just the trickle down of capex that is likely to help the small businesses. But beyond that, the government also has some new schemes. For example, there's a India central government and World Bank scheme called RAMP, Raising Accelerated MSME Performance. It's a 5-year program unveiled recently. It'll have a 60 billion rupees outlay in terms of funding shared by central government and the World Bank. The idea is, how do you help small businesses get access to formal funding? How do you create a platform where small businesses meet suppliers? How do you have better integration across small businesses and their various stakeholders? And that is what this program, which has been specially designed for small businesses, will look at. The other thing for small businesses is an extension of the credit guarantee scheme. Now, in the pandemic, the government provided a credit guarantee scheme for about 4.5 trillion rupees. That has been extended by 1 more year, and its outlay has also been increased from 4.5 to 5 trillion rupees, with all of the incremental going to the hospitality sector. Now, remember that because hospitality sector, depends on high touch services, they were, quite disrupted through the pandemic. They're coming back for standing on their legs again. So giving them this credit guarantee scheme will be very useful as they stand back up and as they start working again. So that was some of the focus on SMEs. As mentioned before, there was also a focus on SEZ, the special economic zones, which can become very efficient if the policy is done properly. I think India has had a few years of experience, and now it stands in a place where it has decided to completely revamp the SEZ Act, the SEZ law. The idea is now very different. The idea is that the central government can't alone deal with ease of doing business. It has to partner with states. How do you bring states in the entire process of increasing India's manufacturing and improving India's ease of doing business? So this new SEZ law, which has been announced and is likely to take shape over the next 12 months, is going to involve states far more than we've seen in the past. So that is the whole focus on manufacturing. Moving on, there have been some innovative ideas in the budget, and I would say the innovative ideas have focused on modernization, number one, and number two, sustainable growth, green growth. In terms of modernization and new ideas, there is the talk of a new central bank digital currency, CBDC, that the RBI will at least begin some pilots with in the next 12 months. And I think that will be very interesting. The whole world is moving there. It's good to see that India is also taking the first steps. Some other sectors which are new and innovative, a battery swapping infrastructure, which would be could be an important player as India moves towards EVs. Green sovereign bonds. India hasn't issued green sovereign bonds yet. It plans to try that out this year. If it works out, then maybe it will also spur a domestic corporate bond market for green bonds, an area which is not fully developed in India right now. So that's another innovation in the budget. A third innovation is the 5G rollout on telecom. The 5G auctions will happen over the 12 months. I think a big push to modernization on the back of 5G rollout. And then finally, some other innovative sectors like drones as a service. How do you really incorporate them in various parts of the economy? Now, there has also been a big push to startups. In fact, the drones sort of bring us there because the government has invited startups to come and take the drone technology, the rules, and try and do many innovative things, for example, helping farming and so on and so forth. But why startups? Startups have become this huge new engine of growth in India. As is well known, India is a very young country with a huge entrepreneurial spirit. Till about 5-6 years ago, there used to be a lot of problems with access to finance. But in the last 5 years, there has been big increase in VC, PE, FDI inflows into the country. all geared towards digital startups, new age digital startups. We've had $80 billion of inflows in the last 5 years. Today, 50% of India's FDI is digital, not physical, digital. So there has been a huge interest in new age tech firms, and this is likely to be, a growth engine for the economy in the next several years. The government also, announced, some measures for them in the budget. For instance, the government did acknowledge that VC, PE funding have really increased, but this time they have planned to open start a new expert committee to look at the financial frictions which a lot of the VC, PE investors face, and how do you remove, those some of those frictions. I think that's a welcome step for startups. Also, there have been some, extension of tax incentives, some easing of long-term capital gains tax, which will help the startups, and the speaker after me, I'm sure, will go into this in a lot more detail. So in terms of the sectors under the innovation umbrella, startups are something which are a focus of this budget. Now, where does all of this generally fit into India's growth profile? In the short run, our sense is that the next 2 quarters is going to be very strong growth, led by pent-up services demand as we are coming out of the pandemic. But once pent-up demand fades, what will raise India's growth? And the answer to that question, or at least the hopeful answer to that question, is private capex, private investment. A lot of people are hoping that towards the second half of the year, private investments really rise. And there are some good reasons why it should. Corporate balance sheets are in a much healthier position now than they were pre-pandemic. All of this central bank liquidity in the pandemic period have allowed large firms to delever, to clean up their balance sheets. So many of the balance sheets look very attractive and geared to investment at this point. The one thing that was holding back private investment was the fact that there was still a lot of policy uncertainty in the environment. Back-to-back waves are happening. There's so many supply disruptions around the world. Global commodity prices are rising. Central banks are changing stance. That's a lot of policy uncertainty. And private capex doesn't generally thrive when there is so much policy uncertainty. From that perspective, the budget has been a source of stability and predictability. There haven't been big tax changes, fiscal consolidation. The themes it has focused on have been largely predictable. There's a sense of continuity. So at a time when global environment is very volatile, the budget has played a big role by being a source of stability. And I think this is something that is generally positive for private capex over the medium term. So in that sense, I would say the budget has done a good job in terms of promoting long-term sustainable growth. Just to recap on the themes, as I said, capex, capital expenditure, is a big theme. Fiscal federalism, the fact that you will now join hands with the states of India, both in doing capital expenditure, but also for improving ease of doing business, is a very good innovation. Third, there has been a lot of modernization, moving to 5G, trying to get a CBDC, some innovative ideas. There has been thoughts on sustainability, green sovereign bonds, battery swapping infrastructure. So these are all the themes we like in the budget. Before I end, also a word on what I would have wanted to be a little different in the budget. One, it would have been good if the government had a slightly lower borrowing number. But I think that's a feedback the government has taken away, and it is trying to work on those fronts. It has a few levers. It's trying to work on those fronts, because you see, if you borrow too much from the market, then a lot is not left for the private sector. But the government has a few levers to pull there, and the government is working on that front. The second is import tariffs. We've slapped a few new import tariffs on some goods. Beyond a point, you have to be careful about slapping import tariffs because it can raise the cost of production. So that is the other thing I would have done a little differently. Finally, I wish there would have been a little more social welfare spending, because a lot of people have got disrupted in the pandemic. But my sense is that because the government has underestimated tax revenues, to the extent that money becomes available this year, that money can be put into more social welfare spending. So this is my overall take in the budget. I hope you found it useful.
Thank you, Ms. Pranjal. We also have with us two tax experts, Mr. Uday and Mr. Amitabh from KNAV India. We are happy to share that KNAV India is one of our go-to-market experts who provide go-to-market advisory for SICKI members looking for expansion in India. Mr. Uday Ved is based out of the KNAV's Mumbai office as a lead partner in the Global Tax Practice Group. Uday has more than 30 years of experience in M&A, inbound and outbound tax structuring, cross-border transactions, and global reorganizations. He has held positions with Big Four firms as a national head of tax, KPMG India, global tax partner of Anderson India, and co-head of tax, RSM. Uday has been regularly nominated as a leading Indian tax advisor by Euromoney in the last 1 decade. Over the years, he has interacted extensively with the Central Board of Direct Taxes and regulatory bodies in India in making representations to them on important international and domestic tax as well as regulatory issues. Mr. Amitabh Khemka. Mr. Amitabh has more than 2 decades of professional experience in the arena of indirect taxes with KPMG India, Vodafone India, BMR Advisors, and Sthir Advisors. He has led industry representations on indirect taxes on behalf of industry forums before the Indian government. Amitabh was a member of the Working Group on GST, a subgroup of the Empowered Committee of State Finance Ministers in India. Amitabh is member of National Taxation Committee of Confederation of Indian Industry. Amitabh has assisted businesses in implementing GST in respect of tax, technology, trainings, and tools. His industry exposure is diverse, including telecommunication, pharmaceutical, manufacturing, power and renewable energy, media and entertainment, advertising, and the list goes on. Let us hear from them. Over to you, Mr. Uday and Mr. Amitabh.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pooja, for this kind introduction and allowing us to share some of our thoughts with you. We always enjoyed working with you in the past, and I'm sure this session is no different. Yes. Bringing the right panelists for the subjects. Mr. Daryani gave a very good perspective in the beginning in terms of the Singapore India Business Forum and how Singapore has played a very important role on the FDI, bringing foreign investments in the country. Number of them also, because India-Singapore tax treaty, in addition to, of course, Singapore bringing its own investment from funds and startups and SMEs, a lot of investment also got rooted in the past because of the favorable tax treaty between India and Singapore, and that has helped India in a big manner in terms of foreign investment. Pranjul gave some good perspective on the economics in terms of, and finally at the end she made some very useful pertinent comments on the tax policies, and I'll take it from that perspective in addition to what she said about the economy. Overall, the budget is sent very, very positive signals. A lot of certainty, the stable and predictable policies. Over the years, the foreign investment regime, irrespective of the government, it has been a foreign investment government which is on there, and the current government has really taken it to a next level. There are record foreign investments, $80 billion that Mr. Kishore Daryani made some comments on that. Almost all sectors, before I get into maybe specifics on tax, are now permissible under 100% route. There are few sectoral restrictions, but all startups, MSMEs, and most of the sectors are permissible up to 100%. Over the years, these sectors have got liberalized, and we've got some confidence that it is not only that hot money in the form of foreign investment, FIIs, the funds which can just take away the money anytime, but a hardcore FDI is coming. Even those FIIs, funds who are coming, have stayed in India over last many years. So India sits on a good foreign exchange reserve, a lot of positivity after the way pandemic has been handled. And in that light, the tax budget in this year is not actually a surprise to me. Okay, if one looked at an economic survey of 2021, which was announced 2021-22, which was announced a day before the budget, it said about how the economy has done over last 1 year in spite of pandemic. What are the measures which happened, and the And you could also see a record tax collections in spite of pandemic, particularly from July 21, for 6 months, more than 1 lakh crore of GST collections. This year in the finance minister made in the budget speech, January 2022 again was a record tax collections on GST. What GST has done is also increase the corporate tax collections and the individual tax collections. Just because the way entire input tax credit mechanism is built, lot of India was and to an extent continues still parallel economy, but government has made substantial effort to reduce that and bring that parallel economy into the official economy. And GST has played a very important role, and I'm sure my partner Amitabh will throw some light on how the GST has worked and what is in store for the budget. So over the years, if I go little, maybe 5 years back, government announced on the floor of the parliament at that point of time, the then finance minister, to say that we will reduce the corporate tax rate from 30 to 25%. And that was a statement made on the floor of the parliament. And over a 4-year period, 4.5-year period, that promise was kept. So I think one thing is the credibility of the government and the tax policies. Over the time, we have seen reducing tax rates, the stable and predictable tax policies. We didn't expect any surprises. Okay, maybe people would have expected that common man should have got some more goodies and all those things, which is fine. But there were no new additional taxes. And no new tax itself is a good kind of a reason. And that's why the market cheered. Why it cheered was one of the reasons. And in addition, some changes on the capital gains tax, which the capital market cheered. So if one look at the key measures, the tax rates have remained unchanged. Within that, the corporate tax rate is now 25% at the maximum rate. If one invests in a new manufacturing unit, a new manufacturing facility, then the tax rate is 15%. With surcharge, it is 17%. One of the lowest in the world. Okay, as good as Singapore. If you look at USA, the tax rate is 21%. With Biden, it is going to go to 26%, and with state taxes, it may go to 30%. You look at UK, it is upward of 20%. You look at China, it is 25%. So India is one of the lowest tax rates in terms of manufacturing units. And that's why government wants to encourage the Make in India project. And we have seen this year also the extension of this benefit by 1 more year. And we would urge all Singapore businesses to invest in the new manufacturing units, be it through a startup route or a normal route. And that will give, tax plays an important role. I'm not saying that tax is a driver for starting the business. But of course, you have merits of the unit and the business, why you come to a particular country. But tax plays an important role. Within that, 15 to 17% is a great rate. The other change which happened was on the capital gains, where a surcharge on the Indian residents at the highest level on HNIs goes to 37%. So effectively, the 30% individual rate can go up to 43%. And government has the budget has reduced that surcharge from 37 to 15%. Effectively, the maximum rate is 35.35%. And we'll see the change which has impacted and how again capital market reacted to that. Interestingly, in the financial sector, government is promoting the GIFT City, as you might have seen. A lot of you might have read over last 4 or 5 years, much more in last 2 years. And they set up an international financial service center within the GIFT City near Ahmedabad in Gandhinagar. And if you set up a unit, this is right now applicable to financial services, banks, fintech companies, insurance, reinsurance, which is again Singapore being one of the key markets on that, can bring that fund in the IFSC. It is as good as a fund or an entity in Singapore or in London or in New York. And government also has further liberalized by saying that there are a lot of litigations. It can happen, right? The businesses may go wrong, and then there are litigation which may happen. So International Arbitration Center is proposed to be set up as an end-to-end mechanism. Concessional tax regime for startup. If you are an eligible registered startup, then you get a tax holiday of 3 years out of any 10 years that you can choose. This year it was going to end. The date has been extended by 1 more year. So any startup being incorporated over next 1 more year will be eligible. for up to March 23 will be eligible for that benefit. The commercial production, as I said, the new incentive, that tax rate of 25 was slashed to 15 in end 2019, September 2019, and the pandemic hit. So number of companies who wanted to set up unit have not been able to take that benefit. So again, this year, the government has extended that deadline for forming the new companies from March 23 to March 24. So you still have 2 more years time by which you can commence your production and you still be eligible for the reduced rate of tax. So let us see how the reduction in surcharge has helped. We just did some quick numbers. And if you are a non-resident or a private equity out of Singapore investing into an entity in India, and then you divested that, the tax rate is 10%. With surcharge, it goes up to 14% currently. Now, with a reduction in this surcharge from 37 to 15%, the rate will go to 12. So that's clearly 2% saving, and this will facilitate more M&A transactions, I would believe. For resident individual, the impact is much more, whereas the base rate of tax rate for non-resident is 10. For an individual in any company, any resident in India, the base rate is 20%. So you are seeing a 4% saving. So whereas we would have ideally liked this difference to go between 10 and 20, so 20 still remains as far as the Indian residents are concerned, but still a 4.5% saving in and this is now applies not only to the companies in the listed space, if you invested in a listed company, but all non-listed companies and all capital assets. So as a Singapore NRI, if you had a property in India, as an example, the tax rate is 20%, and with surcharge, it could have gone to 28%. Even the reduced surcharge applies to all capital assets, be it shares in the company, listed or unlisted, a mutual fund, any other land, property, anything. For all that, the surcharge has been reduced. I think this is a good. We could have expected more, but capital gain still plays an important role in terms of the tax collection. But this surcharge of 4.5% will benefit resident individuals much more, and non-resident by 2%. One more thing, over the years, there was always a gap between policy and implementation. The policy had all good measures. When it went to the grassroots level, the tax administration, huge litigation, transfer pricing litigation, tax litigation, and always there is a question which comes from foreign investors to us saying, is there any way in your country to kill litigation? And the answer was no. Only way it can be killed is if at the first level, when you file the return, the tax office accepted that. The moment there was a difference in your returned income and the tax assessed income, then the litigation will go on at least up to tribunal level if it is a question of fact, or it will go to courts if it is a question of law. Over the years, that litigation has been reduced. Administration has become much more simpler, much more digital. Everything is now filing online. This year's budget has also introduced a concept of what is called the updated tax return. And on the face of it, it may look a very simple and a small initiative, but the impact is huge. What it's trying to say is that you can file a return within a certain deadline. You can revise the return within certain deadline, and you don't have much time. Now they're saying, okay, for genuine reason, if you had omitted some income from your return, you can go and update the tax return, and you have 2 more years from the end of the assessment year. So this provision is going to come into force from financial year 22-23, which is effective April 22. The financial year ends on 23, and the assessment year, as we call it, ends on 24. You will have a chance to update your return up to March 31, 2026. A huge time been given to you. This also includes if for some reason you did not file the return. What it's trying to say is that you come forward and make the honest declaration of your income. For some reason, if you had missed out, come back, file the return, and we'll accept it. For the first time, you can kill the litigation before even it has begun. So the impact that it would have, in my view, would be huge. And if the litigation got killed at the first level, so government is saying, look, we are taking various measures. It's a two-way traffic. Put trust in us. And over the years, we have seen, last few years, that things have become much more simpler online. We have now, the faceless tax scrutiny at a first level, at commissioner level, now at a tribunal level, it is proposed to be introduced. So the India is really going full-fledged digital, even on the tax administration side. Updated return will play an important role. Of course, you need to pay some additional tax if you made that error of 25% if the declaration is made within 12 months and 50% if it is made within 24 months. So I think from that perspective, I think it would be worth if there was a genuine error or omission of income in your return of income. One would have seen a huge amount of discussion over last 10 days on this virtual digital asset and on Indian policy on the crypto. When we see the leading newspaper Economic Times, that is occupying the maximum space in last 1 week. And government and RBI, Reserve Bank of India, which is a central bank, its view is not whether it is legal or illegal. They're framing a policy to regulate cryptocurrency. And the choice was that, look, in the past, number of people have invested in the cryptocurrency. As far as income tax law is concerned, whether you declare or not declare, if there is an income earned from whatever source, then it should be taxable. And that's why you have seen a definition of virtual digital asset. Interestingly, it is defined as a separate class of asset under the budget, different from capital asset. The tax rate when you transfer this virtual digital asset is 30%. And with surcharge and cess, we believe it can go up to 43%. So the reduced surcharge on capital gains may or may not apply. Although there are talks which have happened in last 1 week to say if you treat it as a capital asset, maybe you'll get a reduced surcharge. So that clarity is needed. This new law will come into force from April 1, 22, which is financial year 22-23. And again, the Central Board of Direct Taxes officials and the chairman have gone on record to say that as far as the crypto gains up to March 22 is concerned, if at all, then it will be governed by, between the tax office and the tax payer to decide whether it should be a capital gain or a normal business income or income from other sources. But going forward, it will be a separate class of asset. One message which has come out is when you look at the definition of virtual digital asset, it also includes the non-fungible asset, which is becoming more important. And government has kept rights to include or exclude any asset as a virtual digital asset. Very interestingly, there is one exception. The term Indian currency and foreign currency is excluded. So one thing is very clear, the message which government the RBI has given here is that the Indian virtual digital asset is not and will never be an official Indian currency. It is excluded. Of course, this will be then linked to the policy which will be announced. Just today, the governor of RBI has made sure that they are not in a hurry to come out with this digital currency. They'll look at the policy and then come out with it, and rightly so, because it can have huge impact. Whereas a country like Singapore and more developed countries have full capital account convertibility. We have in India convertibility only on the current account. Capital account transactions are still regulated by RBI. And rightly so, India has benefited from these policies. So maybe it will come back, the policy will come back. But as far as virtual digital asset is concerned, they put in 1% withholding tax on payment to on transfer by a resident, more to track the sale than anything else. And government also have gone on record to say that they already have. The question is, how will they find out? Because most of these cryptocurrencies are bought from the foreign sources. Right? India didn't have any cryptocurrency in India till now, till almost 1 year back. We have few now exchanges which are starting on that, or a company starting. So if at all people would have made that investment through what is called the LRS route, the liberalized remittance scheme, people would have put in, or some people might have gone through the overseas investment route, not permissible in my view, and RBI will strictly say no as an ODI investment, but people may have made it. Now those people, whether they have disclosed this currency in their tax return, there is one schedule called Schedule FA, foreign assets, and you are supposed to disclose if you bought that foreign cryptocurrency or for any foreign asset for that matter. So people have disclosed, not disclosed, how will it turn? These are the questions which are coming up. But I think government is geared to address this issue. the interesting part is that if India is integrated into the world, then it cannot be divorced of this. This is going to stay with us forever. The only message which has gone is that India will treat this asset as different from Indian currency. But it will remain that the trade in this, in the digital world, will increase. And so, RBI will come out with a policy on the digital currency. Actually, maybe I will request my colleague Vaibhav, who is also worked extensively on this, to give him that opportunity to maybe run through the few slides quickly, and then we'll go to Amitabh. Vaibhav, any question we have, I'll be more than happy to take it up later. But Vaibhav, over to you for next few slides.
Sure. Thank you, sir. So let's touch upon some other interesting tax measures which have been come up in this union budget, which is one of the bonus stripping.
I would say keep it in 5 minutes because Amitabh has to take it up.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Please.
Sure. So here, what has happened was in the bonus stripping provisions, now it has been also extended also to the units of the business trust, that is REITs and InvITs. And moving on to other provisions in the tax schedule. Now let us go to tax incentives for IFSC sector. Now government has introduced this as an enabling measures for IFSC in India to be at par with many other developed countries like Singapore and other countries where already this kind of a provision is intact there. Here it provides some tax exemptions to non-residents as well, and it provides some liberty to non-residents to gain benefit from these exemptions provided, and this amendment will take effect from financial year 22-23.
And then Vaibhav investment in IFSC unit gives 10-year tax holiday. So that's a great point, which is there for last 2 years, but this will enable even more to further investment.
Absolutely, sir. So these are like kind of enabling provisions, enabling measures which government has taken and has been extended. Moving on to these are all business related expenses. Now, let me take you through section 37 here, that this section particularly dealt with only all the non-business related expenses which have been disallowed earlier. Now, there were also circulars which was been by the CBDT circular taking care of the Indian Medical Council, where there were some prohibitions and violations for some products or some benefits which have been given to the doctors. To address this kind of a clarificatory provision has been introduced now in this budget, wherein all the perquisites or benefits which are violating now would not be allowed under section 37 of the Act, and also all the expenses related to the offenses which have been made by the companies will not be allowed. Now, bigger discussion on health and education cess, which is there under section 40. This particularly is also clarificatory in nature. This is a retrospective amendment taking effect from 1st April 2005 onwards. And this particularly reverses all the CBDT circular and also the judgments which have been allowing the education cess and allowable expenditure. So this is also clarificatory that the cess will be considered as an additional tax and therefore it will be inadmissible in nature. Now moving on to the onus of proving the source of funds. Earlier, what would happen in section 68 I'm referring to here. Here what happens is whenever there was any unexplained credits in the books of the company, these unexplained credits was been taken as a scanner for assessing officers, and the onus of proving this benefit was on the assessing officer. If it was not satisfactory in the eyes of the assessing officer, then it was added as an income. Now, it was noticed that there were some pernicious practice of converting some unaccounted money which have been taken in the form of loans or borrowings and converting them and doing all the wrong means. So this has been caught off and by the income tax authorities, and they have now extended this not only to the shares, application money received for shares or application monies, but also it is an extent to the loans and borrowings. Moving on to the withdrawal of beneficial rate. This was when the dividend was received by an Indian company from a foreign company, where the Indian entity held about more than 26% or more in that foreign entity. those dividends were taxed at 15% concessional rate. Those were in lines with 1150, which was earlier there. With view in Finance Act 2020, it was seen that this dividend distribution tax, which was earlier, that was been abolished, that is 1150, and thereby it was been taxed in the hands of the shareholders directly. To keep in line and to provide parity, this particular provision has been withdrawn and it has now been taxed at an applicable rate to the domestic company. However, having said that, the deduction which was available under Section ATM, which is the if we distribute that dividend which is received from a foreign company to our onward shareholders in the same financial year, then that deduction under ATM would be allowed. So these are pretty much of income tax provisions which were clarificatory and to bring parity between the other sections which have been introduced earlier. So now, yep, that's it, sir.
Yeah, over to you, Amitabh. Thank you, Vaibhav.
Thank you.
Thanks, Uday. So let's look at the indirect tax perspective of the union budget. Vaibhav, thanks for taking the slides on. So could you please change the slide? So let's look at the macro picture first from an indirect tax perspective. We heard that as far as the fiscal deficit is concerned, against the budget estimate of last year of 6.8%, the revised estimate is 6.9%. So it's not very far away from the budget estimate of last year from 6.8 to only 6.9. And what is the reason for it? If you look at the left-hand side bar chart, the tax collections have zoomed up compared to 2021 into 21-22. The pandemic year, if you see, as far as the orange line is concerned, indirect taxes has not taken a hit. So indirect taxes grew from 10.8 trillion to 12.6 trillion. And even if you look at 10.8 trillion in the pandemic year, there's a growth from 1920. Whereas if you do a comparison from a direct tax perspective, which includes more personal income tax and corporate tax, there was completely a dip on the right-hand side. If you look at the percentage, it was negative 10% compared to the earlier year in 1920, where itself it was negative growth. So the tax buoyancy and tax collection has ensured that we manage the fiscal deficit. Now, for the next year, which is 22-23, the budget estimate for indirect taxes is 13.3 trillion, a growth of only 5.7%. And for direct taxes, it is 14.2 trillion, a growth of 13.6. When we are saying that the economy will grow at 8.5% next year, why should indirect taxes grow only at 5.7%? Let's go to the next slide. So the details we can understand, is there really a degrowth in indirect taxes, which we looked at 5.7%. If you look at the components of indirect tax being collected, it is GST, the union excise duty, which is largely excise duty on petroleum products or fossil fuels, and excise duty on tobacco products. And then we have customs duty. If you look at GST collections, 5.5 trillion and 3.9 trillion in 2021. Now, if you just compare the orange portion of the bar chart in 2021 compared to 1920, you will see there's a huge growth in 2021. Whereas the yellow portion has shrunk. So the pandemic did hit as far as the GST is concerned, but possibly the lower cost per barrel of the oil helped the government to collect excise duty on petroleum products. And that is why we see that the union excise duty collection went up drastically compared to 1920 in 2021 compared to 1920. And that's the reason why we see there is a growth in the pandemic year when it comes to indirect tax collections. As far as GST is concerned, the consumption tax is concerned, it had a degrowth. Now, same amount got collected 3.9 trillion in 2021 revised estimate also. The budget estimate for 21-22 was 3.35 trillion, which has been maintained in 22-23 budget estimate also. So as far as petroleum related taxes are concerned, it was budgeted 3.35. The revised estimate is 3.94 trillion. And that has again given a boost to the indirect tax collections in 21-22. Why we do see a downfall? Because of again the union excise duty 3.9 to 3.35. As far as GST is concerned, it is growing at 15.5% is the estimated growth from 21-22 to 22-23. So direct tax collections going up by 13.6%, GST expected to grow at 15.5%. That's what we are seeing as far as the revenue numbers are concerned. And that is the one reason why the union budget estimates the fiscal deficit to be only at 6.4% for the next year. One more important point which we are hearing the members from the tax who were part of the budget making process, that as far as the fossil fuel is concerned, it will possibly reduce over a period of time and the green energy will take it over. So the collections which are happening from customs on import of crude oil, the union excise duty which is coming from the sale of petroleum products inside the country, these are likely to go down over the period of time as green energy will get increased and fossil fuel will reduce. So the GST collections will replace over a period of time the union excise duty and custom duty, which as and when the fossil fuel consumption goes down. One more aspect from a macro perspective, or a couple of more macro perspective remaining on this slide, and then we'll get into the budget or the finance bill related details. And it is being spoken in the post-budget discussions with the government officers also, is that there was no change in the GST rates, which cannot happen in the budget because it has to be done by the GST Council, another constitutional body. But last year in February 21, the 15th Finance Commission, which has a period from 2021 to 2026, they recommended that the rate of GST of 12% and 18% should be merged. Currently, we have 5% as a merit rate, 12 and 18 as a standard rate, and 28 as a demerit rate. So India incidentally has two merit rates. We were needing it when we went into GST in 2017. But as we are reaching 5 years of completion of GST on 30th June 2022, the recommendation from the constitutional body 15th Finance Commission is that merge these two rates. Currently, all the goods put together and all the services put together, the revenue rate, average revenue rate is 11.5%. And the revenue neutral rate when we went into GST was 15.5%. So one is expecting soon that whenever the GST councils meet after 30th June, once the 5-year period is over, possibly in the forthcoming year, we can see a lot of tweaking in the GST rates. The another reason why you can expect tweaking is there is a compensation was promised to the state governments for 5-year period. Now that 5-year period will come to an end on 30th June. Going forward, the compensation, the promise which was given by the center, that period comes to an end. Now the states have to manage their own financial affairs as far as any loss which is arising on implementation of GST. If you see in 21-22, the government of India borrowed 1.1 trillion and gave to the states because of pandemic, the states were not able to get or garner revenue through GST. So possibly states would also like that the GST rate should go up so that the collections can be come in. Can we go to the next slide, please? So let's get into some of the micro aspects from what is there in the finance bill. What are the changes proposed in the law? From a goods and service tax perspective, we see in the country that when it comes to taking input tax credit, the issue of fake invoices, missing dealers, which we have seen in Europe and in the state of Maharashtra in the pre-GST regime. So to tighten the belt, there are additional conditions being put qua in taking of the input tax credit. Now the input tax credit can be only taken if the vendor has disclosed it. Earlier, it was more of facilitation. Now from 1st January 2022, it has been tightened to say that you can only take the credit if the seller has disclosed it in his return. The ITC, which was on a provisional basis, has now been pushed to self-assessment basis, and government has taken a power that how much tax you can pay through cash and how much through credit, they can prescribe that. So that empowerment is being proposed in the finance bill. How will it get implemented? We will have to see. As far as filing returns is also concerned, that belt is also getting tightened. If you have not, there are generally two. One is the furnishing of the outward details and one is furnishing of the return. Now, what they are saying is if you have not furnished last month the details, you can't do it this month. If you have not filed last month's return, you can't file this month's return. If you have not furnished detail of outward supplies of this month, which is required to be done by 10th or 11th of the month, you can't file your return on 20th of the month. And if you have not filed last month's return on 20th, this month you can't file the details of outward supplies on 10th. Now, what happens because of all this is that if you don't file your returns, your customer will not get the credit, because now credit is also your supplier furnishing the details. So to ensure that the fake invoices, people who are missing traders, they are brought into the TaxNet chain or those things don't happen, this aspect has been proposed to be tightened in the GST law. One retrospective amendment, beneficial and benevolent for the taxpayers. One aspect which was there in the GST was if I have wrongly taken the credit, then there was an interest and penalty. The change is that if you take wrongly the credit but don't use it, then there will be no interest. Interest will only happen if you have taken and you have used it, because only when you use it, it impacts the government finance. Otherwise, you have not taken the money from the government. So the earlier law was saying only if you have taken, then also there was an interest. Now it states that it will be only availed and utilization, both the events. And the rate of interest was earlier 24%, and now it is stated in the finance bill that it will be 18% with retrospective effect from July 1. Moving on from GST to customs, what are the key changes? One of the key changes which has happened is that in last finance bill, the government had announced that we will look at more than 300 exemption notifications, and we will see what is that we can weed out. What happens in the custom law is that there is a tariff, the government gives the tariff rate, and then there are a number of exemptions. So when you have to read the law or when you have to look at the rate for your item, you have to look at the tariff and then search for exemptions whether your item falls in any of the exemptions, and then you get your exact customs rate. So what they had promised last year in the last finance bill was they will ease out this aspect for many of the items. It was to be done by October 2021, but now in this finance bill, they have looked at more than 350 exemption notifications, ironed them out, removed it, and all the amendments has been brought in the tariff itself. So it becomes very easier to look at your customs rate, and there has been no impact as far as the custom duty rates are concerned on these items. On some of the items, custom duty rates has been increased. On some of the items where currently the manufacturing happens in India, but raw material is required to be imported, raw material is not available in few items, the custom duty rates has been reduced for the raw material. In case of capital goods, import and project import, the rates have been increased. One important aspect what has been proposed to be amended is that when the Directorate of Revenue Intelligence officers, audit officers, or preventive officers were doing the assessment or were adjudicating the matter post investigation, the question came up before the Supreme Court was that are they the proper officers as defined in the customs law. Possibly the intent of the government was this, yes, they are proper officers, but when the Supreme Court read the law, the Supreme Court ruled that they are not the proper officers, they can't do adjudication, they can't issue show cause notices. Government thought it was always that the case, so now it is proposed that the law is amended as per the intent of the law. So all these officers would now be regarded as the proper officers and they can issue show cause notices. As far as valuation related rules are concerned, government has taken an empowerment to add certain more conditions to that. If there is likelihood that the importer is not declaring the value correctly, then what are the additional obligations which can be casted upon the importer? Now, what the law proposes is giving an empowerment to the government that you can put additional obligations on the importer. Now, through the rules, as we move on, they will prescribe what are these additional obligations, but the empowerment to give additional obligations to the importer, where the officer believes that the import value is not declared correctly, that empowerment has been taken. Last thing, second last bullet, advanced rulings. Generally, we saw that advanced rulings once taken, unless there was a change, it would continue. But now what is provided is that the advanced ruling will have a life cycle of only 3 years. And if there are changes in facts or law, then the advanced ruling becomes redundant. So this is an important part, I feel, on the advanced ruling side, restricting the ruling for a period of 3 years. So these were some of the key changes in the finance bill on the customs duty. Is there a next slide? So I will take just a couple of points. On SEZ, there was a mention, but one important piece which will happen when the SEZ law is reincarnated in a new avatar, there will be a lot of custom related aspects which will also be enshrined in that new law. So what is proposed is a lot of automation will be there in the customs related aspects when the new SEZ law or the new law is pronounced. And when we look at the production linked incentives, it's a very welcome move of the Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme, where all the 13 sectors have welcomed. A lot of investment is coming into the country because of the production linked incentive scheme. And one new scheme pursuant to the budget which has been announced in the 14th sector is solar panels. The budget gave the employment numbers, the investment numbers, but this is one scheme of the government which is working really well. The businesses have really welcomed this and investments have come in all the 13 sectors which government has announced. So this was a snapshot from an indirect tax perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Amitabh and Mr. Uday. I will now open the floor to question answers. So we have one question. Mr. Ramesh has asked that the special economic zones in India are not new. They were discussed many years ago with world leaders, including former Singapore PM Goh Chok Tong. What factors do you think are critical in ensuring the SEZs work this time and not fizzle away after the new act is introduced and passed? I think Ms. Pranjul has answered this question a bit. So, Ms. Pranjul, are you here? I don't think so. Maybe anybody, Mr. Uday or Mr. Amitabh, do you want to take up this question?
So I think Pranjul responded was that the plan is, as far as SEZ is concerned, see, in SEZ, what used to happen is it was a scheme by the central government. But if you had to set up a new SEZ, a lot of state approvals were required. So it would start with the infrastructure or the land and all the infrastructure which is connected with that property or that location. And if a new SEZ developer is coming in with respect to electricity, water, approvals, roads, too many things were with the state. So what is being planned or what is pronounced is that states will become partners now in the new enshrined SEZ policy, and it will help the development of the enterprise and the service hubs. So what it appears from the budget speech is that states will be made a comprehensive part and parcel of the entire scheme of SEZ policy.
And just one more point I would make, Amitabh, there was also an expectation. Currently, the SEZ tax holidays, which have been given, there is only a GST indirect tax benefit. There is no further income tax benefit because the sunset time and the close has gone. And a lot of companies which were continuing that 10 out of 15 years, even most of them have now finished their tax holiday. And the expectation was again that in order to promote exports and make India competitive, the SEZ benefits even for income tax holidays should be reintroduced. Of course, we didn't find that mentioned, but the finance minister's speech did mention that, or the revenue secretary discussion after that, to say that we want a moderate rate and simple regime and very less incentives. So what has happened over years is we had 50% corporate tax rate and we had all these benefits, right, including depreciation, export related benefits, SEZ. So the tax rate has gone down from 50 now to 25, right? And for manufacturing company, 15, local manufacturing company. So you need to naturally reduce the incentive. So you cannot have both where you keep on reducing tax rate and keep on, increasing the incentives. So that part, I think there is an expectation management which was set right in my mind during the budget speech. Otherwise, that 25% will again come to 35%. You don't want that. You want a simple regime. People focus on business and not focus on tax litigation.
Correct.
One more question is that now the FM had announced that India's central bank will issue a digital rupee in 2022 and 23. How will that work and what effect will be it having further?
So let me take that, Amitabh. So this entire discussion has come up because many parts of the world, as I mentioned in previously, there is a capital account convertibility, and the crypto can be possibly used as a parallel currency. No, though not many. Most of the governments in Western world don't approve that, or advanced countries don't approve that. So it is more of a mechanism to settle the transaction. It's like, good old days, Amitabh and I used to always talk. There was this barter transaction. So you give 10 kilos of wheat and receive 5 kilos of sugar as an example. So this is the way of reduce. Although you can only settle your transaction through a currency, which is your official currency. But crypto may be trying to become a parallel currency. This one as a new digital currency, independent of this, will come out. This is what FM said, more to align with the digital world. So as and when the government will come out, in fact, I mentioned the governor of RBI, Reserve Bank of India, just made a statement today that they are not in a hurry. So don't get in next 3 months you will have that central bank digital currency CBDC has been mentioned, or e-currency. It will take, but maybe during the end of the year, when things become, they want to see the impact of this, because if for some reason cryptocurrency is used as a parallel currency, this $600 billion of reserve may simply disappear. Okay, considering the past. So government wants to study the impact of this crypto trade, how it is. Once they frame the policy on crypto, non-fungible asset, everything which will come out. After that, they will look at, in my view, the digital currency. But one thing, as I said, was very clear. The definition of virtual digital asset, although it is under Income Tax Act, in my view, it is a message to say that it will exclude the Indian currency and foreign currency. So it won't be a formal currency at all. The e-currency and the hard currency, which is being used today, would be allowed to be exchanged and used as I understood from the finance minister's speech. So it will be a parallel more to say that India is going digital, and cannot be that everything else is digital but the currency is still physical. So physical and e-currency will parallelly run, as I understand, but we'll see how it evolves over a period of time.
Okay. I can't see any. Okay. Yeah. One more question. I don't know whether it will be relevant. There was something announced for the offshore funds as well, right? So any emphasis on that if they just a minute. Relocation of offshore funds.
Yeah, so that came not this year, but a prior year budget. As I said, the IFSC, the International Financial Service Center, government is really promoting that to say, why do we need to have offshore funds today in the past? This came, I think, last year in Finance Act of 2021. This year only the further enable has been made in the Finance Bill 2022.
Yep.
What it says that there are existing funds located in, say, Singapore or Mauritius or Cayman Islands, Luxembourg, Guernsey, Jersey. Those, when they sell the stock, then they pay the tax. The concept of income tax is an actual income, realized gains, and not notional income. So the government was trying to say that whereas a new fund should be relocated, should be located in the IFSC, what happens to the existing fund? The way the tax law reads is that even if they were relocating from, say, Singapore or Mauritius to India IFSC, there is a transfer of a capital asset and subject to capital gains. So last year budget made an enabling provision that if you relocate the fund from existing wherever you are, say in Singapore to IFSC, at that point of time, we will not tax you. It will not be treated as transfer. Only when the IFSC will finally sell the securities, at that time, so it means a pass-through status was given to relocation. Like we have a pass-through status for, say, alternate investment funds, AIF. It is being taxed in the hands of the unit holders or shareholders and not at the AIF level. Here they give a pass-through status also for the fund who wanted to relocate from the existing offshore location to IFSC. But that happened last year. And today, this time, there have been further benefits which have been given, which was mentioned in the slide.
Okay, maybe one more last question. What are, according to you, the key hits and misses from the taxation perspective?
Key hits are like, I would say, stable and the predictable tax policy, the key hits. So no surprise is a good news in my view. Okay. There was also a discussion, whether government, will make it more populist, will increase the surcharge on the super rich, right? Whether this 37 will go to more, the effective 43 will become 50. Whether estate tax, duty tax, or inheritance tax will come. So we didn't expect that. Okay, because this government believes in maybe discussions, and possibly, certainly at some point of time it may come, not come. But this year was not alright. So no surprise. I would say it was a good news, a hit in my mind. More a path. You want, like as a businessman, you have a path, you have a business plan. You don't run on a 3 to 6 month basis or a year on year. You have a 3-year, 5-year business plan. So here there is a business plan, I would say, for a want of word, from a government perspective, say this is how you focus on your business, this is how the tax system will move. Further changes on the IFSC, I think great as a hit, I would say. In terms of the miss, I would say maybe people were expecting the common man to increase the exemption limit from 2.5 lakhs to whatever. Today you have a tax rebate up to 5 lakhs. People were thinking 5 lakhs should go to 8 lakhs. But if you look at, in terms of the compliance, we have 1.3 billion or 1.4 billion is a population. 1% of the population are effective taxpayers. 4%, 5% are effective filers. So there are 8 to 9 crore filers who file the return, but they don't necessarily pay the tax because they are under this 5 lakh rebate or they take exemption of the incentives of LIC premium and everything. Effective taxpayer is 1.5 crore, which is about 1% of the population. So if you had increased that limit, this 1.5 crore also would have disappeared, part of that. So here is a way where, because there is a government is trying to widen the tax base through various means. You don't want kind of a step which is retrograde from that perspective. So that may be a miss if you look at it. And to an extent, maybe Amitabh can add the total little GST implementation, the zeal to collect more taxes, because that's where I think the real kiddie comes in. Some of the existing businesses are feeling little pinch, but government is very committed to GST. Any comment on from your perspective, Amitabh?
So let me take the hit first, and I'll come to your point today because that's a miss side of it. So from a hit perspective, I would say the changes in the custom duty rates, the entire rehaul, removal of those 350 exemptions, it's not at all a small exercise, let me tell you. It's a massive exercise to look at all the exemption notifications, and actually the businesses, industry, professionals were all pulled in to look at what needs to be changed. So it was a conceptual change that we will now, instead of showing the peak rate of custom duty, we'll bring the actual rate of custom duty in the tariff itself. And I didn't go into detail qua the custom rate tinkering, but in one aspect for capital goods and for project import, they have given the next 4 years custom duty rates. So they've given a staggered rate to say that these items over the next 4 years, what will be the custom duty for next 4 years? So now you know for a fact that if I am putting money into this kind of aspect, or I want to put a new factory or a new plant and I need to bring capital goods, as Atmanirbhar Bharat happens, to protect the domestic industry also, the custom duty rates are known. So in my view, that's a hit. From a miss perspective, what they were saying, not from a budget perspective, I don't think so. In the union budget, you can do anything. But I think Uday is raising the point, how is tax administration happening? And I think what Uday was trying to say, in the zeal of doing tax collections, it comes generally at the cost of tax administration. So to collect, sometimes you're hard on the taxpayer and you miss to distinguish between who's the genuine tax evader and who's the genuine taxpayer. And something may go wrong, could be error, but the tax administrator then considers that genuine taxpayer to be also a tax evader. So that's the thing. I would like to just add one more angle to it. Again, not a miss, but this year that 5-year ending is very, very important in the financial affairs of the states. And in my view, not only the GST rates will get tinkered, which I spoke about, possibly states may come up with new indirect taxes itself. Because if they don't collect money enough, there's a huge borrowing they have done in last 2 years. So last year, when there was a shortfall on the collection, the center said that we can't give you more money. If your growth is not happening, you go and borrow from the market. At the most, we can help you in the borrowing. If required, we can give sovereign guarantee on that. But you will have to borrow. Now, I don't think the states can keep borrowing. So that's another thing I think which we will have to keep an eye on.
Okay. Any more questions or any like panelists wants to discuss anything? Mr. Kishore, you want to say something before we end? You're on mute, sir.
Maybe you can unmute him, Pooja. I don't know.
I'm not able to do. I have to
I see.
see.
No, he's done it at his local device,
Yeah.
so they'll not be able to. I think he's on the phone, it seems.
No. I was trying to unmute it.
Yeah, he's using a phone, so he's not able to unmute himself.
Correct.
So do you have somebody to help you? Yeah, maybe he's asking somebody. Sorry about it.
That's okay.
Sean, can we unmute him? I think so. He's not able to. So maybe, yeah. Thank you all. Thank you all for this lovely discussion. Yeah. So maybe we'll get into huddle another time and discuss further, and maybe we will have a comparison also for the Singapore budget, because the Singapore budget is announced. Maybe he has unmuted himself. Yeah.
Finally, finally. All right. I finally unmuted myself. Thank you, everyone. Yes, I find that was very informative, the information you give us, although there were not very many changes, right, to the budget. But those people interested in investing in India, they have some benefits there. And also this International Financial Center, IFSC, I think it's a good thing, because when people transfer their shares or their funds into there, there's no taxes there, right? Until the profits or gains are realized, then they are taxed on that. So basically, it's a good budget for everybody, and it's a stable budget. That's what I can say. So finally, I would like to have my closing remarks, right? So we had a very interesting discussion on the Indian budget and the growth trajectory that India is expected to take in the next 5 years. We in SICI too will be watching Indian developments very closely, as we always do, and in fact, as part of a further engagement with the respective Indian states. SICI is currently in the planning stages of a major SME conference in the month of May. I think it's probably shifted now. I think it's postponed to August. This conference had to be postponed last year due to the pandemic. On the element of this conference is a session with the chamber leaders of all the Indian states. We have about 26 Indian states coming to the session. We have sent invitations to them to take part, and responses have been so far forthcoming. We hope to make this SME conference a signature event where our chamber leaders and those from India can strengthen their bonds and enhance people to interact with them in the business community. It leaves me now to thank all of you for this enriching session. Stay healthy, stay safe. And once again, thank you for all participating in this session. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you all.